Well, good evening and welcome. This is the open house public engagement session for the City of Janesville's zoning and subdivision ordinance rewrite process. My name is Dwayne Sherrick. I'm the planning director for the city. Joining me here this evening are representatives from the city's planning division, including Brian Schweigel, Trey Meyer, and Mackenzie Wilcox. Mackenzie is a recent addition to our planning team. We're excited to have her here tonight. Additionally, we have representatives from the consulting firm Grafe out of the Milwaukee office. And here representing the Grafe team is Dominic Marlowe, Doug Seymour, and Tim Schwecke. They're going to be leading the presentation. We do have a presentation. I'll let you know we're going to keep that to like 20 minutes, run through a bunch of information that pertains to this code update process, regulations that we're looking at, trends, but ultimately we're here to listen to you this evening to try and get input, feedback on this process, want to understand and know what your comments are, what's important to you, issues and opportunities, and so forth. Also like to let you know that this presentation and the first portion of the open house session here is being recorded by JATVMedia Services. We'll take that recording and we'll post that to the project website that's devoted to the code update process, and that'll be available anytime throughout the duration of this process for folks to visit the website and review the presentation if you'd like. Additionally, once the presentation is complete, what we'd like to do is have all of those in attendance move through the variety of exhibits and boards that we have here, engage in a smaller group discussion, answer your questions, take your input, and move forward with that format here tonight. I guess with that, I'm going to turn this over at this point to Dominic, who can then walk us through the presentation. But we're excited to move forward with this next step of the process. After tonight, we're going to take the information that's gathered. We're going to move forward into the drafting element or phase of this update process, where we're actually starting to craft and draft codes and regulations. And there'll be opportunities then early next year, probably late next spring, to get back to this issue. So with that, the floor is yours, Dominic. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Dominic Marlowe. I am an urban planner with Grafe, which is an engineering, planning, and consulting firm that has been contracted with the City of Janesville to rewrite your zoning and subdivision ordinances. I'm joined with my colleagues, Doug Seymour and Tim Schwecke. A brief agenda of what we're going to go over. Like we said, we're going to try to keep this short so that we can have more time to go over the actual meat and potatoes of the night, which I'm not going to get into in the actual presentation. I'll introduce you to our team, give a brief overview of this actual project and sort of where we are now, where we're going, and sort of what's happened so far. And then I'm going to give a preview of sort of what are our next steps in terms of actually writing up the code and the elements that will be the standards that regulate your development moving forward. I'll give you a brief rundown of sort of where are all the resources, where you can learn more about this and engage further with the plan. And then I'll sort of describe what all is in this room so you can have a bit of a roadmap moving throughout the space. So these are a map on the right of all the different places that our teams have engaged with different zoning code rewrites or subdivision, or either community-wide for the whole city or small districts of a city, or other type of community. And so Grafe is the sort of planning behind all of this, and then we're joined with Civitech Consulting, led by Tim Schwecke, which is a firm that specializes in writing zoning codes and zoning code technology. And so as a part of tonight, in addition to the actual sort of high-level concepts of the zoning rewrite, we'll also have an opportunity to engage with the technology side and the interactive portion of the Zoning Hub platform, which is sort of a way of making the zoning code more accessible, and it'll be sort of a way for you to preview sort of what's to come in the future if the city decides to go all the way down the path of interaction. So we're actually very early in this code rewrite process right now, and so a lot of things haven't been decided fully. And so the point of this open house tonight is really to engage the public on what to expect moving forward, and there'll be future open houses that are really engaging more with the draft content of the code. And so this is our opportunity to really hear from a high level, what are you expecting, what are your concerns, high level values, and then to sort of talk through some of those high level ideas that we really want to get feedback on and see what's a good fit for Janesville. So first things first, if you haven't already, we would really encourage everybody who's in this room, please sign in. We want to get a accurate representation of who's attended. And then, make sure we've got all that. And then I'll give an overview of this project overall, sort of between now and the next year. There's going to be some frequently asked questions on the boards, and then we'll give an overview of what's happened so far. I'll tell you about what's happened to date, and then we're going to go through this third box, not here, but in the boards, this idea of zoning reform opportunities. And so these boards are filled with these sort of high-level big ideas that are sort of structural changes to the zoning code that would sort of on a higher level change how Janesville approaches new developments. And so rather than focusing on things like, should this building be 4 feet or 3 feet from this, blah, 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 it's more high level big ideas. I won't get into them now because if I do, you'll be listening to me all day. And then we'll have the Zoning Hub interactive format available. So a brief overview of the project and our desired outcome. So what you're seeing on this screen right now is a description and sort of a graphic of all the things that the city released in their RFP, request for proposals, that we responded to. So this is what the city wanted to see out of the zoning code and subdivision rewrite. First and foremost, to make sure that it aligns with your comprehensive plan and state statutes. Your comprehensive plan has been updated much more recently than your zoning code. So your zoning code is decades old, and your comp plan is much more recent than that. So there are things that we want to make sure that the code aligns with. We want to make it much simpler and easier to engage with and understand, both for developers who need to use it to actually propose things, for the public to understand what actually can and cannot be built next to their properties, on their properties, in your community. And then also for your staff to actually be able to administer the code in a way that is less burdensome and simpler, meaning that they can facilitate efficient reviews. We want to be responsive to where the market is economically, both at a local level and also regional and nationally, but also what your community needs outside of just an economic market. We want to facilitate high quality development, meaning that we don't want just to allow anything, but we want to understand what is good development, what is desirable, and how do we get there? What are the procedures and standards we need to be able to get to that desirable place? And then we want to, the underlying thing, so this fifth box is really this idea that there's this balance that needs to be struck between being overly regulatory and forcing every development to be absolutely perfect, to making it really burdensome to build something, or being really loose and allowing all types of development in and sort of doing anything you can to get investment. So there's a balancing act between being pro-development, being pro-regulation, and sort of navigating that space is sort of the central tension behind rewriting a zoning code. And so when we're talking about these big ideas, when we're asking about what your values are and what's best for Janesville, we're going to be grappling with that sort of big idea of, what are the trade-offs behind all these tough decisions that your elected officials are dealing with every single day, and that we have civic institutions to help us navigate. Here's a sort of a shortened, kind of simplified version of our project timeline. So you can see right now we're in the public open house phase number 1. There will be a number 2 coming in the future, but before now, we've sort of done a lot of research into what your existing code is, what your existing development patterns are, and gathered a lot of data. And then we've also done a lot of public engagement to date, and this is continuing that public engagement, and that will continue to happen moving forward. So the public engagement is occurring throughout this process in terms of getting values. We've interviewed a lot of individuals. Doug will go into this in a little bit more detail right after I hand it off to him. And we sort of wrapped all that in to make sure that we're fully informed so that we don't, lead you on the wrong path, but we want to make sure that we really get a deeper understanding. None of us are from Janesville. A lot of us have spent time in Janesville, have family, have social connections, but you are all the experts on your community. So we're really focused on making sure that we're engaging with that expertise. Moving forward, we'll actually begin writing the code. So no writing has begun. We've got ideas, but we have not started recommending anything. We'll have different phases of drafting that code. We'll present draft documents to your plan commission. Those will be publicly available, and your plan commission and elected officials will be reviewing those, providing feedback, and we'll have opportunities to sort of incorporate that feedback into future drafts. We'll have another open house, which will be sort of a in progress, but much more complete picture of what's being recommended to get that final phase of feedback. And then we'll have a final draft presented, ideally by summer 2025. And so that's sort of our target date. So this gives you an understanding of sort of when you should look to engage with the process in the future, if that's something you want to do. Doug, can you come talk about what's happened so far?
Thank you, Don. Good evening, everybody. Just to recap, my name is Doug Seymour. I'm the project lead for this project. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, what's happened. So back in, I think, in spring of this year, it seems like only a few weeks ago, but we started and meeting with your staff and did a site visit just to get an idea of what were some of the big issues that the community was thinking about when they're looking to do the zoning code and subdivision ordinance update. And that's one thing which, the zoning code is kind of a capital zoning code, right? But perhaps as important is the subdivision code and how land is subdivided. And that's also a part of this task. So we did a pretty comprehensive site visit, all piled in the van, and we got very familiar with the city of Janesville and some of the issues that we look at moving forward. Then I believe it was in June, we made an initial presentation to your plan commission, mostly focusing on the public engagement aspect of that. And as Dom talked about, public engagement is, although this is kind of the ramping down of the initial public engagement goes on throughout this process. So I think it's a misnomer to say that we're kind of ramping down public engagement, because we're not. But we're at the point where we're taking what we've heard and turning that into products that we can share with your staff, with your plan commission, ultimately moving towards those review of those codes for future adoption. We have, in the past months, done reviews of your existing zoning, subdivision, and sign codes, and we have met with your staff on a monthly basis, and probably much more than that, just to make sure that we're addressing all the issues and touching all the bases. Part of that involved a review of the city's development procedures. Again, as we move forward, you'll see that that's going to be a recurring theme of some of the public engagement that we heard so far, is that maybe there's some room to do some new things with respect to your development procedures. And I guess most recently, we had an opportunity to do a series of 13 focus groups. So there are 10 focus groups with the private sector. And many of you in this room were part of those focus groups, and I thank you. Heard a lot there. We'll kind of summarize that. But we also had a series of separate focus groups with city staff to really kind of zero in on some more tangible things, I would think, than that we heard in some of the public focus groups. So talk about those focus groups. And I think there's a 23-page document which kind of summarizes all that focus groups. That's, and we'll have an executive summary of that available on the website at some point. But I think there's some general themes, and they fill in. I'll let you read the categories over on the right-hand side here. But Janesville needs more housing options at all levels of density and affordability. Heard that almost universally from everyone in the focus groups. We heard also that there are some requirements, there are some perceived requirements in there that really require some pretty upfront barriers to entry in terms of development costs, and that's seen as a barrier, which kind of leads to mixed perceptions about Janesville as a favorable place to do business. We heard loud and clear that the new code needs to be friendly, understandable, and Dom talked about that at all levels, be it the general public, staff, or your development community. There's a need to balance rigid standards, right? We all have to have standards. But is there a role for some flexibility in some of those standards and procedures? We think there is. We'll find out what that right balance is. And we heard that you need to focus, or the city needs to focus on all parts of Janesville, not just downtown, not just Milton Avenue corridor, but Janesville is a large community, and attention needs to be paid throughout the city. And finally, as is the case with all high-performing organizations, clear, consistent communication is important. Zeroing in on city staff, and as I said, it's really more a little more detailed than we've heard from the initial focus groups, the public focus groups. So we really tried to identify improvements, technical requirements, standards, and processes that, through their experience, they've identified as maybe needing some revisions. I think one of the really neat things about this process is staff, university recognize the need for more discretion and flexibility in the review process, and they're eager to have that opportunity. And it's really, we found out that they really want to make it easier for themselves, not only to administer the code, but easier for you as user of the code to have to look through it and understand it without having to have a master's degree in planning. So that's we want to keep it simple, we want to keep it easy to understand and easy to enforce on the back end. Like the general public, they recognize that staff recognizes the need for more housing of different types and affordability options and densities, and they're happy to see that. Don't think we need to go through all of them, but they just want to make sure the code is easier to understand, easier to implement. And I'll let Don bring it home.
So what's next after today is we're going to start writing the code, and that involves some key elements. I'm going to make it simpler than it necessarily is in reality, but these are some of the high-level things you need to be thinking about. First and foremost is to establish the districts and the uses. So everybody who lives in Janesville or anywhere else lives in a zoning district. If you own a commercial property, industrial property, those are all in separate districts that say what can be built, what cannot be built, how it can be built. We need to decide first and foremost, are we going to keep all the districts the same? Are we going to slightly change them, consolidate, split them up, add new ones? And that'll be figured out first. And once we understand what are the different districts, and those are all the different colors, this is just an example table on the right. This is not an example for Janesville. We'll decide what uses can go in those districts. So what kinds of land uses can be conducted? Residential, commercial, industrial, park uses, institutional uses like schools and churches, et cetera. And we'll have a table and a matrix that kind of shows what each of those uses have to go through in terms of a process. Are they allowed? Are they allowed but only under certain conditions? And there's an exhaustive list of several dozen, if not hundreds, of uses that are potentially a part of that. The next step is once we understand what can be built, where it can be built, the next question to answer is how can it be built? And so right now, if you've read your code, which I'm sorry if you have, because it's about several hundred pages of black and white text that if it was on your bookshelf, it won't be one of your bigger books. It's just a lot of text. And this is common of most communities, until a community has taken the time to modernize their code, it's just a lot of walls of text. And if you're trying to understand what are all the requirements, you don't have any figures or images, it can just be very difficult and unwieldy to keep track of them all, understand them all, make sure they don't conflict. And so when we rewrite a zoning code, we have a series of illustrations that actually show what the different requirements are in a very simplified way. So what is a side yard garage setback when there's a parking within this distance of well, we'll just show you in a picture, and there'll be a letter on it, and it'll be easy. And so we'll have a series of things that kind of say what are the development standards. And the big part here is to figure out what are those development standards. So once again, this is just an example of what they can look like, but these are regulating things like how big houses can be, how close to a lot line they can be, how large a parking lot can be, or how small a parking lot can be, landscaping standards, what types of uses need to be covered by a fence, which ones can be not covered by a fence and open and visible from the street, where can sidewalk seating go in front of a business, what kinds of districts, so all those sort of things that are the physical elements of how a development can be built. And the last thing is the actual process that a development undergoes to get approved. So what you're seeing here is getting to yes faster, right? So the customer in this case is anybody developing property. So anybody who owns a piece of land is the customer of the City of Janesville, navigating the code process, and they want to get to you. They want their approval, they want their development approved so they can start building it. And before you get your development approved, you have to design your development, you have to plan it out, figure out what's going to get built. You have to do a market study to make sure that what you build will actually be profitable, or at least break even or lose a little, not too much money. There's all these risks that people who own property encounter when they're trying to get something built. And another one of those risks is whether or not the local government is even going to approve it. or whether there's going to be some process when you're halfway through the development that pops up. You're like, oh, I didn't know I had to do that requirement. Oh, it's going to cost me $30,000 to get that requirement fulfilled. I wish I had known about that at the beginning so I could have planned for it. So making sure that we're reducing the amount of risk that goes through this process of discovery, so that when you're navigating the development process, you know kind of what's expected of you from the beginning, rather than sort of having to take it as you go and not know for sure what's going to get you a yes in that end. And so the solution to this is really us making sure that the expectations from the city are clear and understood. And if you're developing something that the city wants to see, that the city has said this is desirable, you've got a lot stronger chance of saying, hey, if you meet all those standards, you should be able to just build with minimal risk. And I think we've all heard that things are getting more expensive right now. Supply chains are, the cost to develop is very expensive. Housing has never been more expensive in the last 100 years. And as a result, we need to make it so that the city of Janesville is not representing one more of those things that's causing a risk to development. We can't get rid of all the risk, but what we can do is make it a lot easier to deal with this process. So after today, or during this meeting, if you want to, we have a one-stop shop website where you can continue to learn more. So this website, you could scan that QR code with your phone or type in the URL right below it to go to this website, which is kind of your the one place where we're going to be posting all information about this rewrite process. There is a community survey that just went live today that you can take. You can also leave public comments. You can get all links to all the existing development codes. And basically anything else you want to learn about the project will be on this website. So if you have a question after today, it's there. If you have a question today, come talk to us. We're available to answer any of them for you, and we want to hear from what you think. And then this is just a copy of the slide I showed earlier, kind of what's available today. And I think I'm going to leave that up after this, but I just want to remind you that we're going to have a demonstration on that screen over there of the Zoning Hub platform. So if you kind of want to see what it's going to be like to navigate this process, you can go over there and see it. We've populated a little bit of an example with Janesville itself into the Zoning Hub platform. So we'll be able to sort of navigate that as well, get a little bit of a presentation from Tim on that. And with that, I will release everybody, and thank you all for coming. I hope it wasn't too long, and let's talk of zoning.
All right, thank you, Dominic, and thank you all for attending. We have this room until at least 7 o'clock tonight. We're all available. We'll be distributed staff and representatives from GRAFE at the various exhibits to take your input, answer questions, talk to you one-on-one about those concerns that you may have and input that you want to share. I think we also have, as he mentioned, the comment cards available, Post-it notes. You can post those notes to the various boards reflecting your comments and concerns. And again, encourage you to take the survey. We're going to keep that survey up through the end of this month, so another 2.5 weeks or so. Very good. Thank you.